Choo choo! You that noise? That's the Cedric Coward hype train. Better get your ticket if you don't got it, because the train is about to take off. We about to talk about that and more coming up here on Locked On Grizzlies.
You are Locked On Grizzlies, your daily Memphis Grizzlies podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Choo choo! The train about to take off, y'all, but hey, everybody doing? Welcome to Locked On Grizzlies. I am your host, Damichael Cole, beat writer for the Commercial Appeal right here in Memphis, Tennessee. Well, coming to you from Nashville, Tennessee, as of this episode, as the Grizzlies wrap up training camp. 3 practices, all done. Next time, many of you are going to be able to see the Grizzlies Saturday at open practice. If you're able to, get out there to open practice, go check out the boys and whatnot before they get to the real action coming up on Monday. Well, technically the real action, but the first preseason game. But this episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Head to FanDuel.com to get started right now. We got a lot to talk about in today's show as we continue to wrap up what's been happening in training camp. I've been out here for the last 3 days. Got a lot of intel and seen some things with my eyes as well, just about what this Grizzlies team will look like. And I think in this show, a lot of you will be happy, what you hear. And as we get into, the hype train that is Cedric Coward. Is if you didn't hear that train, and you still ain't heard that train, I can hear it in my background right now. I don't know if y'all can hear choo choo. That's the Cedric Coward hype train. It's getting ready to take off. And look, you better get your ticket because when it's gone, it's gone. And I don't usually talk like this. This is not my preference of how to introduce a young player to the NBA or whatever the case may be, because we haven't seen him even play in a game yet. And I like to, I'm gonna see it to believe it type of person. That's me. At the end of the day, I gotta see it before I can believe it. But I will talk in this episode about what I have seen regarding Cedric Coward. And then we'll talk about what his teammates have said. We'll talk about what his coaches have said. We'll talk about what he said, because we've heard all those perspectives so far. And based on what I've seen in camp, I have not seen a lot. I'm not going to sit here and tell a story like I've seen him go off the dribble behind the back in isolations and shoot pull-up mid-range jumpers or make these outstanding passes that the Grizzlies are going to need, eventually from their starting wings and things like that. I haven't seen him do much of that. All I've seen him do is shoot the basketball. And when I've seen him shoot the basketball, what I will say is it's looked really good. I mean, he has tremendous form. He shoots with confidence. For those who play the game NBA 2K, because I know we've done some episodes where we kind of reference NBA 2K, but for those who play 2K, it's like it reminds me of a My Park 2K jumper that you want to have. It's quick. He has a quick release, but his mechanics are really sound and really good. And I can't see, someone with those type of mechanics should have a really solid shooting season. Now, I don't know how good of a shooter he'll be, but with his mechanics, he should be able to shoot the basketball at a decent level. And I know I've seen some of the fans with the videos that I posted on X have kind of said, man, I haven't seen Cedric Coward miss a shot yet. Well, I've seen him miss some shots, but I'll say it hasn't been many. When I'm watching him, G.D. Jackson, and Jalen Wells shoot, because that's kind of the trio that I've seen watch paired up together. It's no doubt in my mind that he's made more three-pointers than Jalen Wells and G.G. Jackson in those pairings when those guys are doing their around the horns and shoot from different three-point shots. So that's kind of what I've seen. Now we got to get into kind of what the teammates have said and stuff like that, because you have some players on the Grizzlies who I think are fairly honest. You have some players I think are just going to hype their teammates up because they're good teammates. That's what they're supposed to do, right? They're not going to go to the media and say, this player sucks. Like, he's not good. He's not going to make the roster. They're not going to do that. But there are a few players when I hear them talking, I'm listening extra carefully because when they say things about their teammates, it's usually because it's really true. And I'm going to take what Scottie Pippen Jr. Said here and go check out my full story over at commercialappeal.com where you get the full story on Cedric Coward, Scottie Pippen quotes, Tuomas Iisalo, and more in that story. But Cedric Coward got a lot of praise from Scottie Pippen Jr., who said, he's been impressed with what he's seen from Cedric Coward. And here was the quote that he said, because I asked him about the expectations and whatnot, like how does he look as, based on the expectations that he's got to you. And he said, I think he's kind of exceeded my expectations. I never really saw any of his highlights, but I've played and I've been around top picks. I feel like he's been one of the better ones I've ever seen. I'm going to say that last sentence again because I don't think y'all really heard me. I feel like he's been one of the better ones I've ever seen. Scottie Pippen Jr. ain't been in the league that long, but like he said, I've played and I've been around top picks. That's a fact. Scottie Pippen Jr. has been around top picks. He's played with top picks. And he said he feels like Cedric Coward is one of the better ones he's ever seen. We already talked about what Gigi Jackson said. Gigi Jackson was talking about Cedric Coward. He said he's the truth. Everyone's talking about what he can do on the defensive end. That's been a big talking point. And I know Joe Mullinax, my co-host, talked about that in an earlier episode. So when Scottie Pippen Jr. says this, how do you not go get your ticket and hop on that hype train? How do you not do it? Because that's one of the straight shooters to me. When they were playing like crap last season, Scottie Pippen Jr. was one of the dudes that was saying, man, we ain't playing defense right now. Or we ain't doing this. Or the other team did this to us. So when he says he feels like that's one of the better ones he's ever seen, I'm listening. Then let's go to the coach's perspective, because I think the coaches, the front office, whatever you say, like it's those people's jobs kind of to try to tame the hype, so to speak. Like you don't want this hype train to you don't want these expectations to just get otherworldly for Cedric Coward. At the end of the day, he's a rookie. He hasn't played in a meaningful basketball game since last November. Like the expectations shouldn't be too much on him. And this is me talking. They should not be too much. Even with all this information that I'm about to dish out here based on what the teammates saying, coaches, and what he's saying, still don't think he should be starting day one unless, we'll revisit in preseason. But as of right now, I still don't think he should be starting day one. Now, with that being said, the coach's perspective, right, it's a little bit different because, a coach isn't going to say exactly what, Scottie Pippen Jr. said. But when we talked to Iisalo, he lit up when he was talking about Cedric Coward. He had a smile on his face. And one thing that he said was the Grizzlies were intrigued with the different pathways with Cedric Coward. That was one of the things that really stood out to them since the beginning. The potential pathways. And when I say potential pathways, he mentioned the fact that Cedric Coward could end up being a 3-and-D wing. He could be an on-the-ball wing. He could end up being a protection defender, a nail defender. Like he mentioned, this is what Iisalo said, all these different potential outcomes for Cedric Coward. But what I got from that is there's a safety somewhere in there. And what I mean by that is if he doesn't turn into, I don't know, some all-star wing, right? Like a Kawhi Leonard or something, 6'6", 6'7" guy with long arms, good scorer, great defender. If he doesn't turn into like that, he still could be a 3-and-D wing starter that would be essential piece that this Grizzlies team is missing. If he doesn't turn into that, he still can be an on-ball wing, as Iisalo said, someone who can play on the ball, take the pressure off of Morant, give you some scoring, solid defense. He still can be, if he's not giving you that, a sound defender who, is the nail defender, really good help defender, really good a protected defender, whereas his own ball defense may not be the best in the world. But with that 7'1" wingspan, he's able to cover up mistakes that his teammates and things like that make. So the point is, there's a safety in this pick, whereas this is a guy who was in Division III basketball a couple years ago, right? Played at Eastern Washington, then went to Washington State, only played 6 games at Washington State. So this was a risky pick. This was a risky pick because we have not seen Cedric Coward play competitive basketball against really good teams at the collegiate level a lot. There's not a lot of footage of it. But with all that being said, with as risky as that sounds with trading up to the 11th pick and getting a guy like that, talking to Iisalo, you still feel that there's a safety net in knowing if he doesn't become this, he'll be this. If he doesn't become that, he can turn into that over there. And all of those outcomes are positive outcomes for the Grizzlies. So that's kind of how you try to tame this a little bit. Like let's look. I know some of you heard what Scotty said, and that's so be it. You got a front seat on the hype train. You in the first class, and you ready to ride. Like that's some of you. That's some of you. You on the hype train. You paid for a little cheap ticket. You know, you like, yeah, I'm here, but my ticket a little cheap. I got to see some basketball games. I feel you. I understand where you're coming from, but Iisalo said a lot of more good things just about how Cedric Coward is approaching everything. And one of the things that he said is he's improving every single day, and they're really impressed with the work that he's putting in. So it's going to be fun to see, how he continues to progress. Because one thing that Cedric Coward is, and I said I was going to talk a little bit more about what he said, but we're about to move on to the next segment. But one thing that Cedric Coward is confident. Well, when we talked to him yesterday, I sensed it. This is a very confident basketball player who believes in his skill set. When I asked him about, you got that moment where you feel like you belong here yet? He said, yeah, they traded up. This is why they drafted me. And this is why I put all this work in. And I'm like, yeah, that's true. And I feel like it was a relevant question because a lot of rookies go through that. A lot of rookies go through, those mental hurdles, and sometimes it happens early in the season. Sometimes it happens later in the season. I remember Zaire Williams' rookie season. It happened earlier in the season for him, and then he became confident more and more as the season went on. So it's like, but this guy, he feels like he belongs, and he feels like he puts the work in to be able to feel that way. So jump on the train. Jump on the train, y'all. If you ain't ready to jump on the train, I don't blame you. Let me know what you guys think. You got your ticket on the Cedric Coward hype train. You say, his teammates might just be hyping him up, or they're just doing what teammates do, or whatever the case may be. Let me know what you guys think on that end, and we'll talk more about Cedric Coward and other Grizzlies players as they continue to progress. But right now, we got to talk about the Grizzlies head coach. We got to talk about Tuomas Iisalo. I learned a lot about him in the last few days. We're going to talk about that next, coming up here on Locked On Grizzlies. But before we get to that, today's episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by Monarch Money. Most people can't name all their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's 401ks, property, or investments. And when you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. And that's why there is Monarch Money. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings you your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or your phone. Monarch is built for people with busy lives. So if you put off organizing your finances, Monarch is for you. Monarch does the heavy lifting just for you. You can link all your accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals, get smart categorization of your spending, and finally feel in control of your money without ever touching a spreadsheet. Make sure you go take advantage of this. Don't let financial opportunities slip through the cracks. Use the code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with the code LOCKEDONNBA. Make sure you go take advantage of that now over at Monarch Money. Welcome back to Locked On Grizzlies as we get ready to talk about the head man in charge, Tuomas Iisalo. And there's so many things that we've already talked about on Iisalo, and there's so many more things that we will continue to talk about on what he brings to the table, what he's doing as the Grizzlies head coach, and so forth. But what I want to talk about right now is his judgment, like what he sees and what I'm gathering from that over the course of these practices. And what I mean by this is the thing about a new head coach is, you have the ability to make things your way, right? You tweak all these things that the team used to do and all of that. But the thing about a coach like Iisalo, where he was the interim and he was promoted to the head coach spot, meaning he was on the staff last season, he has a unique ability to say, I was in the room to see what we were really good at. I was in the room to see what really needs to improve. The Grizzlies played fast last season. They were the number one team in the league in pace. And because of that, their offense ended up being sixth in the league. If you watched the Grizzlies closely last season, a lot of times you probably didn't feel like they had the sixth best offense in the NBA based on offensive rating. It didn't feel that way a lot of times because when they played certain teams, those numbers, the offense didn't look as smooth, didn't look as efficient, or whether it was Ja Morant's numbers not looking like what we're used to seeing and things like that. Like, at the end of the day, the offense finished sixth in the NBA. Now, you can argue about the results when they played the OKCs and of the world and whatnot. But where I'm going with this is, with Iisalo, why would you slow down the pace if that was something that you were really good at last season? He knows that. We were one of the fastest teams in the NBA. We got Ja Morant. We shouldn't change that. It's very simple. Now, you turn that to the other thing that Iisalo has continued to emphasize, and that's intensity. Intensity, to me, wasn't a strength for the Grizzlies last season. And I think that's another reason why Iisalo is pushing that button. We want to play with speed because that was something that we were good at last season. This is just me talking. And we want to play with intensity because that's something that we need to bring more of. And we didn't bring a lot of it. Like, you remember last season, a lot of the questions were toughness, right? When the Grizzlies played the more physical teams, they didn't match those teams from a toughness standpoint. Another way to say that is they weren't as intense. They didn't match the intensity that those teams brought to the table. That is something that they want to shift. So what Iisalo has done is Grizzlies players, they're doing all these drills, bringing out the intensity, right? Where you have clear winners, team winners in drills. And what that do is you got guys competing. They want to win. And the players are talking about this. Like, we're in these drills trying to win. Multiple Grizzlies players on multiple days have talked about how intense this training camp has been. We told you, Ja Morant said, man, we might need inhalers. Other guys have said, this camp has been intense. Ty Jerome was talking about the intensity. I believe, we talked to some other players like Scottie Pippen Jr. was talking about how Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, who's a veteran, who's saying even for him, this has been a super intense camp. He's been in 12 of these before. This is Kentavious Caldwell-Pope's 13th year. He's talking about how intense this camp has been. So, again, that is something where, in the case of Iisalo, he was here last season. He saw the struggles in that area, and they are pressing the button to improve this right now in training camp. Now, it's no guarantee that they're just going to come back because of training camp, the most intense team in the world, but this is what you're supposed to do. You don't ignore the issue, and you address it, and I'm going to give him credit for that. And here's the big one for me. This is a big one for me. So this is something you're going to continue to hear me talk about when we preview the season. You're going to continue to hear me talk about it in the early part of the season, and probably again when we get halfway through the season, because the biggest issue for this Memphis Grizzlies team to me is not rebounding. It's not shooting. It's not defense. It's not they have court offense necessarily. The biggest issue for me within this Grizzlies offense right now, especially from a starting lineup standpoint, is the lack of secondary playmakers. You tell me what your projected starting lineup will be. I'll show you a lineup that probably doesn't have much playmaking other than Ja Morant. That just is what it is. Right now, the projected starters, you're talking about Ja Morant, Jalen Wells, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, Jaren Jackson Jr. when he's healthy, Zach Edey when he's healthy. Let's say hypothetically that five. You look at that five, you got Ja Morant and four other guys who've never averaged 3 assists per game in their careers at any point. I think 2.7 is the most. Like, none of them ever averaged more than 2.7 assists in a season. Jalen Wells, that's not his strength. Kentavious Caldwell-Pope hasn't been his strength over the course of his career. Jaren Jackson Jr., we talked about his playmaking needing to improve for years, hasn't really taken that leap just yet. Zach Edey, that's not a strength of his as well. Jock Landale stepping in for Zach Edey, not really his strength. Santi Aldama, that's a guy who's shown some promise. Santi's got some playmaking to his game, so we will, see what that looks like for him in that little short role. But your playmakers are really off the bench. Because along with Ja, you got to get into Scottie Pippen Jr., Ty Jerome. Like, those guys are guys who give you some of that secondary playmaking. Now I'm going to get into why we're talking about Iisalo's judgment and his understanding, because I think this is a problem, and he's recognized it, I believe, as an area that's going to be important. I asked Iisalo after practice on Thursday. So what are going to be some keys in determining who's going to join that starting lineup? One of the things that he mentioned was secondary playmakers. I said, no, there it is. Because I know I'm not the only one who looks at these assist numbers and look at the projected starters and think, man, there's no Desmond Bane around now when teams just blitz Ja and they say, hey, we're not going to let Ja Morant just dish the ball around to all his teammates and, end the night with 30 points and 12 assists. We're going to make these other guys put the ball on the floor and make plays for their teammates. When teams used to do that last season in the years past to the Grizzlies, Desmond Bane would end up with 9-10 assists. But now, is Jalen Wells going to do that? Is Kentavious Caldwell-Pope going to do that? Is Jaren Jackson Jr. going to do that? The guys who are capable are Ty Jerome, Scottie Pippen Jr., at least the projected rotation players. And Iisalo has talked a lot about combo guard lineups, playing Ja with Ty Jerome, playing Scottie Pippen Jr. with Ja Morant, with Ty Jerome, those lineup pairings. And he's also said something that Taylor Jenkins used to say as well, and I think a lot of coaches just say this, but the starting five isn't going to be exactly, an indicator of who's going to be in the closing lineup, right? It's all about pairings is what he talked about. Pairings over the course of the game, making sure all the lineups have flow throughout them. So the problem that I have is with that projected starting group that many have in their mind, that's a lineup that doesn't have a lot of secondary playmaking, but Iisalo seems to have a plan for addressing that issue. I know we've talked in the past where Jalen Wells has said, he's going to be a runner more in the new offense, which will put him more in the playmaking role. I'm not really ready to see, that as a plan for success just yet. It could be a plan for progress in terms of he needs to be better in that area because they're going to need him probably to do that at some point, but that is not going to work early in the season. He hasn't shown the signs to be that player just yet. So I just wanted to shout out Iisalo's judgment in terms of he's recognizing some of the problems. Now, recognizing problems, fixing problems, two completely different things. But the first step is recognizing them. And as preseason unfolds, as the regular season unfolds, we'll see, his ability to correct these issues and what that looks like. But coming up next in our last segment, we got to talk about one Grizzlies player in particular that might be getting lost on the wind. What about Vince Williams Jr.? Let's talk about Vince Williams Jr. coming up here on Locked On Grizzlies. But before we talk to you about Vince Williams Jr., today's episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel has an offer that you don't want to miss right now. New customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win. That's right. Pick a bet, put down $5, and if it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. There are so many great things to love about FanDuel. It really makes watching football even more exciting because sometimes you just want to watch your team, but with FanDuel, you got a little something riding on the action of other games, and now you're into the other games. So whether you're a casual fan or you just love diving into the stats, FanDuel makes the game day experience so much better. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today and go over and get started over at FanDuel. Make sure you go take advantage of that now at FanDuel. Vince Williams Jr. What's the deal? What's the deal with Vince Williams Jr.? And I only ask this because last year, this was a name that everyone kept saying to me. All the fans, like Vince Williams Jr., can he be the next star? Could he be the next, wing for the Grizzlies or whatever the case may be? And now No one's really saying Vince's name. I looked at that group of wings that was shooting the basketball together, and Cedric Coward, Jalen Wells, Gigi Jackson. I was looking at that group and it's like, yeah, I know when the Grizzlies do those shooting drills, they do them in threes. And I know how Gigi Jackson has talked a lot about, learning from Jalen Wells and his maturation, through his rookie season. And, Cedric Coward being the next, wing that the Grizzlies drafted. But it's like, where is Vince Williams following this equation? Because this is a huge year for him. When this season ends, the Grizzlies have a team option, whether they say, yeah, we're going to keep Vince around here, or that's run its course. This is a big year. He's playing for his time in Memphis. He's probably playing for his time in the NBA. Like, we'll see. But this is a huge year for Vince Williams Jr. Overall. And right now, you just haven't heard his name much. Now, I will also say the media hasn't asked about him a lot as well. So it's not a situation where, maybe they're just hiding. Like, who knows? He could be having a really good camp, and he just hasn't been asked about much. But it's been strange to see kind of Vince Williams kind of floating into the shadows, so to speak. But on the other hand, is this, you listen to him at Media Day, one of the more interesting things that Vince Williams said, or rather so talked about, was his health. And I think I asked him, about where is he now? And his answer surprised me because it wasn't what I've heard. But at the same time, it made sense as he continued to talk. He said he's about 90%. That's what Vince Williams Jr. said. He said he's about 90%. I'm like, man, people been telling me he's healthy. Like, what's 90%? Like, what's that about? But then he continued to talk and basically said that, he wants to see how his foot responds. Like when you play, you go through that game, you go through those physical moments over the course of the game. And at the end of the day, he's 100% healthy. Like, it's a mental thing at this point. And that happens all the time, right? Guys come back from, ACL injuries. They got to think about making that first big cut and things like that. Or guy comes back from Achilles injury. It's pushing off that one time or whatever. They got to, finally clear those mental hurdles. And that seems like that's where Vince Williams Jr. is. Like, he wants to get game action so he can get to the point where he fully, is 100%. That's pretty much what he said. He said, once I get some games under my belt, I'll be able to say at that point that I'm 100%. And the other thing is, I asked him, I was like, are you going to be that old defender? He said, yeah, I plan on being it. I plan on being that pest. That defender that, from a couple seasons ago that everyone, that grew up on everyone. That's what Vince Williams Jr. Wants to be. But again, his name is starting to get lost in the shuffle, it feels like. Jalen Wells is going to play. Cedric Coward is, the way they're talking about him, he's going to play. I'm ready to put him in there. Now you got to figure out Gigi Jackson, what his role is going to be, especially early in the season. I think Gigi Jackson is going to play. But where's Vince Williams in this equation? Because if you go back to the end of last season, I don't know how many people remember this, but Iisalo gave Vince Williams a chance. Especially go back to that playoff series against OKC. He gave him a chance. You know what the result of that was? Scottie Pippen Jr. joined the starting lineup. It got to the point where it was better to start Ja Morant and Scottie Pippen Jr. and just go small than to try to give Vince Williams Jr., who was struggling, getting through the injury or whatever the case may be at the time, a chance. And now, you wonder how much will Iisalo give him a chance, this season, given that you have a Gigi Jackson with potentially more upside, or a Cedric Coward who's been one of the camp standouts, or Jalen Wells who showed you over 79 games last season that, hey, I can be a very productive and important player for this team. So Vince Williams Jr. is kind of just floating in there. He's floating in there. So we'll see kind of what his role. Let me know what you guys think as well. Do you think Vince Williams Jr. Deserves a bigger role in his team? Are you kind of out of it on Vince Williams Jr. as compared to the other wings? Where do you guys stand in it, on the front of Vince Williams Jr.? Let me know what you guys think on that as well. But thank you for making Locked On your first listen today. Locked On Grizzlies for your second listen. Go find the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast. Josh Lloyd hosts the #1 fantasy basketball podcast, giving you daily tips and helping you win your league, all while making you a smarter NBA fan. Find Locked On Fantasy Basketball on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank you guys for tuning in to Locked On Grizzlies with me on today. Me and Joe Nolex will be back with you on next week as we start to get into the nitty-gritty of things on our next show. I believe we'll be previewing the first preseason game of the season. I cannot wait for that. I'm looking forward to it. It should be a fun time, and it's going to be the first time that we get to see, a lot of players get some action in Isalo's new system. So we're going to be our first look at that. So really looking forward to seeing how all that process plays out, and we're going to talk about that in the next episode of Locked On Grizzlies. But until then, appreciate you guys for making Locked On Grizzlies one of your first listen each and every single day. Make sure you continue to listen to Locked On Grizzlies wherever you find your podcast. Until next time, I'm Damichael Cole, and we'll see you on Locked On Grizzlies.